able to have an agreement to. This is a simple and common sense way for us to save money while at the same time making sure the farm program accomplishes what it's supposed to. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
Senator from South Dakota.
may I ask what the how much time is left in the
9 minutes and 37 seconds.
Okay. Mr. President, I want to join my colleague from Iowa who's been a great leader over the years on the issue of biofuels and trying to transition our country away from this dangerous dependence that we have on foreign oil. And over the years has worked to put in place policies that have helped build an industry literally from the ground up. The ethanol industry in its inception many years ago sort of started with just a few farmers getting together, and now today they're producing about 13 billion gallons of ethanol, and actually it represents 10% of our entire fuel supply. There isn't any other fuel in the country, Mr. President, that provides the alternative to traditional gasoline that ethanol does. And that's the result of a lot of investment, a lot of hard work by a lot of people over the years. And it's also been as a result of a dependence upon what has been fairly stable public policy. Now, there is a debate about whether or not that public policy ought to change. And that's certainly a debate that we can have. And I don't want to get into the merits of the individual elements of ethanol policy because, you know, obviously people are going to disagree about that. But I am going to point out that we put this policy in place in December of last year. In December of last year, we told this industry, which represents, this is 204 American-owned plants. These are American companies that employ almost 500,000 indirectly or directly American jobs, American workers in this country. And so we told them in December of last year, 81 senators, many of whom are now saying, I'm going to vote to do away with this particular tax policy. 81 senators voted for it. We had 81 votes in the United States Senate in December that said these are going to be the rules of the game until December of this year. And so now we have this effort to completely change the rules in the middle of the game. Now, I haven't been here all that long. I served 3 terms in the House of Representatives. I'm in my 7th year in the United States Senate. But I don't recall an occasion where we've ever done anything like this, where the Congress has put policy in place, made commitments to American businesses in this case, people who employ American workers, and then tell them 6 months later, I'm sorry, we're just going to pull the rug out, you're out there on your own. Now, it would be one thing if these decisions were made in a vacuum. But most of these businesses made decisions, investment decisions, based upon public policy that was put in place by this Congress. You cannot, in good faith, now go tell them that we're just going to jerk this policy out of the way. Does our word mean anything around here? You know, we've got an issue with this particular amendment to start with because it's unconstitutional. You can't originate a tax measure in the Senate, so it will be blue-slipped in the House of Representatives, which makes everything we're doing right now largely symbolic. This bill isn't going anywhere. But there seem to be people who are intent upon making some sort of statement, I guess, or trying to send some sort of a message. But the end result, if what they were trying to accomplish today were to become law, is you would raise gas prices because you're talking about a $2.4 billion increase in taxes on people who inevitably are going to pass it on. And so why would you want to start raising gas prices at a time when we've got historically high gas prices and people are already being pinched at the pump? And so you single out a specific industry. Now, I've heard people get up today and say, well, you know, we voted for tax extenders last year, but you know what, that was bigger, part of a bigger package. We didn't have to agree with all. Well, then don't vote for it. And surely have the debate then. Why were we not debating this issue last December? If people had issues with this, they should have been brought out then. when we put this policy in place. What in effect we are doing is singling out an industry and saying we are going to punish you by changing the rules in the middle of the game because we don't like your industry or we don't like this particular tax provision. Well, we had a similar debate here a few weeks ago. There was an effort to do something on oil and gas tax provisions. And the argument that was made at the time, myself included, was, why would we single out a specific industry? If we're going to do this, let's do this in a comprehensive way when we look at all types of policies, tax expenditures, favorable tax treatment that various industries in this country get, and let's examine them all together. And if it's time to make some changes, let's make some changes. This is selectively singling out a specific industry and changing a tax policy in the middle of the year. Now, there's been a statement made on the floor that the people who get the benefit of the blender's credit don't want it. Well, it strikes me at least if they don't want it, they don't have to take it. They have to file for it. They have to file with the IRS. If they don't want the blender's credit, they don't have to take it. But most of the people who file for the blender's credit, it is assumed, are going to pass it on to the retailer, to the gas station, and ultimately to the consumer, so that it will result in lower prices. That's what, and most of the people who are refiners anyway are large integrated oil companies who, frankly, I think don't want the competition that is represented by the ethanol industry. They don't have to take the blender's credit. They have to do something to get it. They have to file with the IRS in order to receive it. One other point I want to make, Mr. President, is because there's some talk as well about ethanol and the environmental benefits. Well, let me just say this. I mean, there are certain states in the country who perhaps would have even higher standards. But if you compare ethanol to traditional gasoline, according to the EPA, in terms of what am I looking for here? Greenhouse gas emissions, life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, it is 20% lower, corn-based ethanol, and when we get to cellulosic ethanol, which is the next generation of biofuels, if we can get there, if we don't completely do away with the platform that we have today with corn-based ethanol, it will have a 60% life cycle greenhouse gas emission advantage over traditional gasoline. So corn-based ethanol, 20% cleaner burning than traditional gasoline. Cellulosic ethanol, 60% cleaner burning than gasoline. That's according to the Environmental Protection Agency, which doesn't take a particularly favorable view of these fuels because they like to include other types of, in their calculation, other types of elements like indirect land use in other countries around the world, which frankly we don't think ought to be part of the calculation. But even with that, 20% cleaner burning than traditional gasoline for corn-based ethanol, 60% for cellulosic ethanol. Now, I want to read, if I might, Mr. President, from a letter that I received from an organization called ACOR, and that's the American Council on Renewable Energy. This organization is about 500 deep, represents about 500 other organizations, in some cases American companies, universities, members like Walmart, like DuPont. This is what they say. Current domestic ethanol production is also laying the groundwork and infrastructure for the more advanced biofuels of the future, including cellulosic ethanol, algae-derived fuels, and drop-in fuels. We've already crossed the threshold of these homegrown biofuels meeting a substantial portion of transportation fuel demand for cars and light-duty trucks. But they cannot be further developed without the infrastructure investments that are fostered by current ethanol production today. And they go on to say the Thune-Klobuchar Amendment, which is the amendment I've offered with my colleague from Minnesota, ensures ethanol production will continue while directing limited government resources to support infrastructure development and the transition to advanced biofuels. The ethanol tax credit has been critical to increase domestic ethanol production and corresponding economic growth, job creation, enhanced energy security, and lower gas prices. We urge you to oppose the Coburn Amendment, which would prematurely terminate support for our domestic ethanol industry while failing to invest in critical infrastructure and advanced biofuels. We ask for your support of the Thune-Klobuchar Amendment. Now, the Thune-Klobuchar Amendment, we are working, Mr. President, with the Senator from California, Senator Feinstein, the Senator from Oklahoma, Senator Coburn, on a solution that would hopefully lead us to a result. And it would do what many of the folks here in this chamber want to see done. It would do away completely with the blender's credit effective July 1st and with the ethanol tariff, and it would also put money back into debt reduction. We think that is a better way to do this, and I hope that we can get those discussions will lead somewhere. But this vote today is going to be largely a symbolic vote for reasons I just mentioned. It's unconstitutional. It will be blue-slipped in the House of Representatives, and therefore it makes absolutely no sense for us to be having this vote in the first place, and certainly doesn't make any sense for us to be sending a message to this industry that we want to do away with it. Mr. President, I understand my time has expired, and so I will yield back whatever I have. Thank you.
Has expired.
Mr. President.
Senator from New Jersey.
Mr. President, I rise to speak in favor of the Feinstein Amendment, and I am a proud co-sponsor of this proposal because it will save us money, it will reduce food prices, and in doing so, do it in a responsible manner. Mr. President, ethanol enjoys truly unprecedented support from the federal government. First, there is the renewable fuels mandate that requires ethanol to be blended into gasoline. Second, there is a 45-cent per gallon subsidy to blend ethanol into gasoline that is costing the Treasury nearly $6 billion per year. Third, there is a 54-cent per gallon tariff on imported ethanol, protecting the domestic industry from any serious competition. And to top it all off, the federal government spends billions every year to subsidize the growth of corn for ethanol. So in a time of fiscal constraint, we simply cannot afford to prop up an industry with such enormous supports. And these supports are not just costing taxpayers money, but they are also causing food prices to rise and harming our environment. The United States Department of Agriculture estimates that 40% of this year's corn crop will be used for ethanol. This is raising grain prices worldwide, especially hurting the needy. For these reasons, the Feinstein Amendment has the support of taxpayer right groups, religious groups looking out for the needy, budget hawks concerned about our deficit, livestock growers who use grain as feed, the grocers and restaurants who are seeing food prices increase, and the environmental community who understand that corn ethanol requires enormous amounts of fossil fuels to be produced in the first place. My support for the Feinstein Amendment is not just because it is the right thing to do for our country and our federal budget, but because it is the right thing to do for my home state. New Jersey has over 120,000 flex fuel vehicles, but does not have a single E85 ethanol pump in the entire state. 120,000 cars that are built to allow automakers to gain fuel economy standards, but may never see a drop of E85 fuel. Now, I know that this issue is important to our friends in the Midwest, but ethanol producers already have a guaranteed market for their product as a result of a federal mandate. Now we have an opportunity to help families across the country by ending this failed ethanol policy and providing relief both in terms of their taxes and their food prices. For these reasons, I'll be voting in favor of the Feinstein Amendment and urge my colleagues to do the same. And I also think this vote is important for the larger debate on the deficit. Our friends on the other side of the aisle have said that revenues cannot be a part of the strategy to reduce the deficit. Well, I think this vote and the one earlier this week in which 34 Republicans voted to end these wasteful ethanol tax breaks shows that there is a bipartisan support for cutting wasteful tax subsidies and loopholes, and that these revenue expenditures must be part of any solution on the deficit. And as I speak about that, let me end about another item I think that should be on the table, one that I have been promoting in this chamber. The first place to start in terms of tax expenditures is oil subsidies. A bipartisan majority of 52 senators voted recently to end these tax breaks. If these 34 Republicans come into the fold, we could work together to make some real progress. Oil companies do not need these subsidies. I'm talking about the Big Five. With oil trading at nearly $100 per barrel, they have all the incentive they need in the marketplace. By cutting these subsidies, we can cut the deficit directly by $21 billion. These companies are projected to earn this year up to $144 billion in profits, not proceeds, profits, this year alone. If they can simply live with a mere $142 billion in profits, then they could do their share to reduce the deficit without raising gas prices. So, Mr. President, it's time we come together across party lines and end wasteful tax subsidies to lower the deficit. This vote is an important first step, and I think by doing so we will ensure, notwithstanding, the issues about the blue slips and constitutional impediments, it will send a real clear sense of the Senate that will move us in a direction that will end the ultimate subsidies and help us reduce the deficit. And I think that, combined with ending oil subsidies to get us on the path to a balanced and bipartisan solution, is critical for the nation. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor and observe the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President.
Senator from South Dakota.
Mr. President, are we in a quorum call?
Yes, sir.
I ask unanimous consent the quorum call be dispensed with.
No objection.
Mr. President, I would also just like to speak for a couple of minutes here until another speaker arrives from the other side. Just to, if I might, elaborate a little bit on where these discussions are that we've been having with regard to getting a result and to get a solution that I think actually could get enacted and could become law. Since we first had this vote a couple of days ago, I have been in conversations along with Senator Klobuchar from Minnesota, Senator Coburn, and Senator Feinstein, the sponsors of this amendment, to see if there isn't some way that we could find something that we could actually do that would accomplish what probably many of them would like to see accomplished, but do it in a way that is not disruptive, that is a thoughtful approach to the future of the biofuels industry, and that also does something meaningful in terms of dealing with the debt and the deficit. And so those discussions continue. We continue to get closer and closer, I think, to an agreement there. I hope that my colleagues will continue to talk and discuss that. We're going to continue those discussions after the vote at 2 o'clock. But I say that only to let my colleagues know that even though this particular vote is going to amend a piece of legislation that perhaps isn't going to go anywhere, and certainly this amendment, because it is blue-slipped, because it has a constitutional issue, isn't going to go anywhere, that there are earnest discussions going on right now that would actually, I hope, yield a result. And again, in my view, there is a better way to do this. Obviously, there are people who feel very strongly, very deeply. We've heard that, the emotion of this debate over the last few days about this subject. But there is, in my view, a better way, a right way and a wrong way to do this. And the right way is to do it so that you aren't just sort of pulling the rug out from out an industry in the middle of the year after we have put policy in place that they've been relying upon in terms of their investment decisions. So I would hope that we can get that agreement, and I would certainly hope that my colleagues will bear that in mind. There are a number of members here who obviously are very supportive of the legislation that Senator Klobuchar and I introduced earlier this week, and you heard Senator Grassley speak to that point earlier, Senator Coates and others who are co-sponsors of that amendment. We continue to work with the sponsors of the Coburn Feinstein amendment to see if there isn't a path forward that would enable us to actually get a result, to pass something through the United States Senate. So I want to let my colleagues know that, to just apprise them of the status of those discussions, and in my hopes that we can actually come to a conclusion here that would get a result and not simply have a vote that ends up being largely symbolic. So we'll continue to keep my colleagues apprised as those discussions continue. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.
There's no response. You want to ask for quorum call, sir?
Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent to modify the pending Feinstein Amendment with the changes at the desk. This modification is to correct a drafting error made by Legislative Council.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. All time is yielded back. Question is on the Feinstein Amendment as modified. Is there a sufficient second? Sufficient second? Yes. Appears to be. Under the previous order, the amendment will require 60 votes for its adoption. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayat, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Baucus, Mr. Begich, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Bingaman, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blunt, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Boxer, Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, Mr. Brown of Ohio, Mr. Burr, Ms. Cantwell, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran, Ms. Collins, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. Dement, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mr. Franken, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham,
Feinstein, Coburn, Amendment number 476.
Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Hatch, Mr. Heller, Mr. Hoven, Mrs. Hutchison, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Inouye, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Cole, Mr. Kyle, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Lautenberg, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Lugar, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, sir. Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reid of Rhode Island, Mr. Reid of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Senators voting in the affirmative: Bingaman, Crapo, Dement, Feinstein, Hutchison, Inouye, Kyle, Manchin, Mikulski, Murray, Reid of Nevada, Risch, Rockefeller, Sanders, and Vitter. Senators voting in the negative: Brown of Ohio, Kirk, and Thune. Ms. Klobuchar. Ms. Klobuchar, no. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Conrad, no. Mr. Roberts. Mr. Roberts, no. Mr. Grassley. Mr. Grassley, no. Mrs. Shaheen. Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Cardin, aye. Mr. Reid. Mr. Reid of Rhode Island, aye. Mr. Menendez. Mr. Menendez, aye. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Coburn, aye. Mr. Whitehouse. Mr. Whitehouse, aye. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Harkin, no. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Lugar, no. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Cornyn, aye. Mr. Hoeven. Mr. Hoeven, no. Mr. Wyden. Mr. Wyden, aye. Mr. Alexander. Mr. Alexander, aye. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, no. Mr. Graham. Mr. Graham, aye. Mr. McCain. Mr. McCain, aye. Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, aye. Mr. Kerry. Mr. Kerry, aye. Mr. Carper. Mr. Carper, aye. Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey, no. Mrs. Boxer. Mrs. Boxer, aye. Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer, aye. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of New Mexico, aye. Mrs. Hagan. Mrs. Hagan, aye. Ms. Cantwell. Ms. Cantwell, aye. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson of Florida, aye. Mr. Pryor. Mr. Pryor, aye. Mr. Tester. Mr. Tester, aye. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Leahy, aye. Mr. Cochran. Mr. Cochran, no. Mr. Franken. Mr. Franken, no. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Sessions, aye. Mr. Coons. Mr. Coons, aye. Mr. McConnell. Mr. McConnell, aye. Mr. Johans. Mr. Johans, no. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, aye. Ms. Stabenow. Ms. Stabenow, no. Mr. Blumenthal, aye. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin, no. Ms. Collins. Ms. Collins, aye. Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, aye. Mr. Heller. Mr. Heller, aye. Ms. Snow. Ms. Snow, aye. Mr. Akaka. Mr. Akaka, aye. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coates, no. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Rubio, aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, aye. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Isaacson, aye. Ms. Ayotte. Ms. Ayotte, aye. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch, aye. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Baucus, aye. Mr. Portman. Mr. Portman, no. Mr. Shelby. Mr. Shelby, aye. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Durbin, no. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Conrad, no. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Barrasso, aye. Mr. Wicker. Mr. Wicker, no. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, no. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Merkley, aye. Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb, aye. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Lautenberg, aye. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inhofe, aye. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, aye. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, aye. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, no. Mr. Enzi. Mr. Enzi, aye. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lieberman, aye. Mrs. McCaskill, no. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Blunt, no. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, aye. Mr. Burr. Mr. Burr, aye. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Toomey, aye. Mr. Begich. Mr. Begich, aye. Mr. Paul, aye. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chambliss, no. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Bozeman, aye. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of Colorado, aye. Ms. Landrieu, aye. Mr. Corker, aye.
Are there any senators who have not yet voted or wish to change their vote? If not, on this vote, the yeas are 73, the nays are 27. Under the previous order requiring 60 votes for the adoption of this amendment, the amendment is agreed to. Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be. The question is on the McCain Amendment No. 411. Under the previous order, this amendment will require 60 votes. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. Alexander. Ms. Ayotte. Mr. Barrasso. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Beckidge. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bingaman. Mr. Blumenthal. Mr. Blunt. Mr. Bozeman. Mrs. Boxer. Was it not? Mr. Brown of Massachusetts. Mr. Brown of Ohio. Mr. Burr. Ms. Cantwell. Mr. Cardin. Mr. Carper. Mr. Casey. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Coates. Mr. Coburn. Mr. Cochran. Ms. Collins. Mr. Conrad. Mr. Coons. Mr. Corker. Mr. Cornyn. Mr. Crapo. Aye. Mr. Dement. Mr. Durbin. Mr. Enzi. Mrs. Feinstein. No. Mr. Franken. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mr. Graham. Mr. Grassley. Mrs. Hagan. Mr. Harkin. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Heller. Mr. Hoven. Mrs. Hutchison. Mr. Inhofe. Mr. Inouye. Mr. Isaacson. Mr. Johann. Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota. Mr. Kerry. Mr. Kirk. Ms. Klobuchar. Mr. Cole. Mr. Kyle. Ms. Landrieu. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Leahy. Mr. Lee. Mr. Levin. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lugar. Mr. Manchin. Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Udall. Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson, Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reid of Rhode Island, Mr. Reid of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders,
No.
Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden, Senators voting in the affirmative. Alexander, Ayotte, Barrasso, Blumenthal, Bozeman, Brown in Massachusetts, Burr, Chambliss, Coburn, Collins, Corker, Cornyn, Crapo, Dement, Enzi, Hatch, Heller, Hutcherson, Inhofe, Isaacson, Johnson of Wisconsin, Kyle, Lee, Lieberman, Manchin, McCain, McConnell, Murkowski, Paul, Portman, Risch, Rockefeller, Rubio, Sessions, Shelby, Snow, Toomey, Vitter, Webb, and Wicker. Senators voting in the negative: Akaka, Baucus, Beckidge, Bingaman, Blunt, Boxer, Brown of Ohio, Cantwell, Cardin, Carper, Casey, Coates, Cochran, Conrad, Coons, Durbin, Feinstein, Franken, Gillibrand, Grassley, Hagan, Harkin, Hoven, Inouye, Johans, Johnson of South Dakota, Kirk, Klobuchar, Cole, Landrieu, Leahy, Levin, Lugar, McCaskill, Merkley, Mikulski, Moran, Murray, Nelson, Nebraska, Pryor, Reid of Rhode Island, Reid of Nevada, Roberts, Sanders, Schumer, Shaheen, Stabenow, Tester, Thune, Udall of Colorado, Udall of New Mexico, Warner, Whitehouse, and Wyden. Mr. Carey, no. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Lautenberg, no. Mr. Menendez, no. Mr. Nelson of Florida, no. Mr. Bennett, no.
Mr. Graham? Aye.